Worm fishing for largemouth bass has been Woo Dave's specialty on the professional bass trail for 25 years. But it's a new millennium and things change. Woo soared to victory at the 2000 Bassmasters Classic using another system he perfected for bull-shouldered smallmouth bass. In fact, after Lake Michigan, Woo might now be better known as a smallmouth bass fishing phenomenon. In this exclusive Bass Pro Shops video, we'll ride along with the classic champion and learn the secret tactics he uses to catch big bronzebacks. So sit back, relax, and enjoy winning smallmouth techniques with Woo Daves.
This year, for the first time, the Bassmaster Classic was won on all smallmouth. And I think that's a tribute to smallmouth fishing. And probably 70% of my weight for this year in tournaments was smallmouth. Several stringers or tournaments over 40 up in the 45-pound range. And it's just really come on strong on the tournament trail. And we're going to try and teach you in this video everything we can about smallmouth fishing, or everything we know. We'll probably leave some things out. If we do, write me a letter and let me know what it is, so I can learn a little bit more myself. But I'm going to tell you everything I know, every little trick I can think of to help you become a better smallmouth fisherman. That's a good fish. That is a good fish. Oh, man. That's why I like it. Big spinnerbait. This ought to be a big pike or something. Come up. There he comes. Oh, yes. That is a whopper smallmouth right there, son. Looks like they just don't give up. Let's see if I can get him by the lip. Come to daddy. That's why we like to come north. Big ledge buster spinnerbait and big smallmouth. What you got here is peanut butter and jelly, and they done come together. I want to talk to you about one of the hottest techniques on the tournament trail for the past 2 or 3 years. It's just starting to get out, and it's called deep cranking spinnerbaits. And it originated down in Eufaula, Alabama. A guy by the name of Jack Tibbs, they used to do a lot of deep cranking down there with spinnerbaits, fishing these ledges down in 20 foot of water. And it's hard work to crank a big old heavy crankbait like that. After 20, 30 minutes, the average fisherman hadn't caught a fish. He would just give up. It's too much like work. And I agree with him. It is too much like work. And what Jack came up with was a big spinnerbait that would get down there and emulate a shad or something in that same zone that deep crankbait was running in. And he came up with a lure called ledge buster spinnerbaits. And I've got 3 of them just laid out here. If you want to take a quick look at them, I'll explain them. Here's a 3/4 ounce. Here's a 1 ounce. And here's an 1.5 ounces. That's my favorite. I love that big boy. But we've also got up to 2.5 ounce models. And what this allows you to do, we've always heard of slow rolling spinnerbaits. Most people are using a 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce, and a lot of companies had a 1 ounce, or a few companies did. It was really hard to get hold of them though. But what would happen when you throw a light lure like that and you let it go way down and you start slow rolling it, you've got to crank it so slow to keep it down there that, if the fish is in a mood to hit a really slow lure, that's fine. But if you tried to speed it up, it would rise to the top. And with this 1.5 ounce lure and even the 2 ounce lure, or let's take the 1 ounce lure. I'll just give you a quick demonstration. A little different weights there. This lure I can pull along, let's say at 10 miles an hour. Play like you're in your car and you're driving along at 10 miles an hour at 15 foot deep. I can take this 1.5 ounces and pull it along at 20 miles an hour at the exact same depth. So now I've got a lure running slow, and if I go to my 3/4 ounce model, even slower, and if I go to my 1.5 ounces, I'm moving it faster, or my 2 ounce even faster, and I'm keeping it down in that same zone. So I've got 4 lures to work in one zone at different speeds. And we all know that bass fishing, speed is the key triggering factor in catching bass. You know, presentation, how fast does he want that bait or how slow does he want it? But if you're stuck with one lure or just a light lure, you're stuck at 10 miles an hour in traffic. If that fish is looking for a fast moving bait, we're gonna get out there and speed her up. You know, double our speed or time and a half the speed or whatever with a heavier bait and bring it along. Another place that this has been a key killer is in current, especially behind dams like Pickwick, Kentucky Lake, Wilson, Wheeler. All of these dams, you get back up there in the tail races and everything and a lot of current. Well, if you don't have a big 1.5 ounce bait or a 2 ounce bait, it won't get down in that current. In other words, if I throw a light bait over there, like a 3/4 ounce, and it hits in the water, the current's just gonna sweep it down and it's not gonna get but a foot or two deep. I can throw my 1.5 ounce over there in the same place and it'll get down, I can almost work it 10 or 12 foot deep and let it bump along and bounce off rocks and stuff and keep it down in that current. One other trick I like to do, especially in current, I do this more in current than not, but I like to take a Zoom fluke and just put on here as a trailer. And what that does, it gives me a bulky bait. A lot of these bass that are up here, these smallmouth behind these dams and stuff, are feeding on 8 and 10 inch shad, big, bulky shad. And this bait right here now, that adds a lot of bulk to it and when you're pulling it through the water. And then sometimes I'll even take the skirt off and just keep the fluke on there alone. We'll take this tail and another little thing I like to do is, I'm sure you've heard me say it before, I always like a little chartreuse in anything I'm fishing, and I'll just, you know, dip her down in a little bit and just put a little tail on there. That's all you need. One other thing, this is not a Mickey Mouse bait. You don't throw it on light line, and you don't throw it on limber rods. You don't want a Mickey Mouse rod. You want a rod with a lot of backbone. I use string at least 17-pound test. If I'm in current, 20-pound test, but never less than 17. And the other thing is I've designed a rod for Bass Pro Shop, and it's in the Extreme series. It's gonna be a 7-foot medium heavy rod for throwing this lure. And the 7-foot gives you plenty of leverage to cast it, and you got good backbone leverage when you set the hook on that medium heavy rod. And it'll be in your Bass Pro Shop catalog. I've got a series of rods in there, but you'll see the Ledge Buster cranking rod, and it's set up perfect for this spinnerbait. I'm kind of counting that bait down right along the edge of this grass line. We're in about 18 foot of water, so I want it to come right along the edge of that wall, or whatever I was fishing. I'm gonna cast that just a little farther this time. That wasn't too bad. When you're just barely bumping the grass, you know, that's not too bad. But if you get over in the grass too heavy, you just stay hung up. I want it to come right along that wall there. Feels like my bait's working just perfect this time. I can feel that thing digging there, but you see how easy it is to wind this bait? I mean, I can just take one little finger and wind it. I'm not killing myself like I'd be trying to pull one of those big 20, 30 foot crankbaits along all day. You know, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm getting old and it works me to death. Fish a big crankbait. I'll go out there in a tournament and fish it all day if that's what it takes to catch fish. But I can take my Ledge Buster spinnerbait and compete with anybody with a crankbait almost any time. And again, I'm not working myself to death with it. You know, when you're fishing a river system, one of the key places to look for, the first place I'd ever look for, is current, because smallmouth love current, they're current orientated. And this is a perfect example. We've got a river going right through here. You see this calm water, you know it's deep out here. Right over there you see all these ripples and stuff, and where it's boiling up, that tells me there's a hump there, a rock pile or something. This is a good place to fish a grub or a spinnerbait. Fish are going to usually hold on the upstream side or way back on the back side. But I like to fish the upstream side to start with, because when that water hits against rocks or something, it creates a little undercurrent there, or dead water, and those fish will lay right in that dead water waiting for those minnows to come by. And all we're doing here, I'm basically letting the current work the bait. Not winding it real fast, But I'm trying to get up ahead of this rock pile and just let that bait kind of sweep down across it. You need a good trolling motor too when you're fighting this stuff. You've got to try and hold the boat as still as you can so that the bait will sweep by. If you let the boat go, it's just going to pull your bait away and you lose a lot of good action. But I want to get up where I can bring that bait right across the end of this, where this water's boiling. If they're not on this end, then I'll just make 3 or 4 fan casts going down the top of the hump till I get to the lower end, and I'll concentrate there a little bit more. Same way with the grub. I'm just letting that current work that bait. If I hit bottom, or if I feel it hit a rock, I just pop it up. But it's swimming down there really good. You notice I'm not winding like this, like you normally have to fish a spinnerbait, because the current's working that bait down like that. And this is where these big, especially in your down around Pickwick Lake or somewhere like that, where you've got a lot of hard rolling current, that's where you use your big bulky baits. I've got 1.5 ounce ledge buster on here, and that's 1.5 ounces of weight, and you can see it still sweeping with the current. I don't hardly have to wind it to work it, just enough to keep the blade turning. And that thing's boiling around down in that water. Those big smallmouth will come up and just eat it up. You can see right up ahead just a little bit. That should be right where the head of the rocks are. I'm gonna try and get us back up there with a trolling motor. And that's where you want to bring your bait. When that water hits those rocks right there and comes up, it kind of turns like that under there, and you've got a dead spot. Now that's about a perfect cast. I've got up ahead of those rocks just right, and I'm just letting the bait sink right on down till it touches a rock like that. And I'm winding it slow, letting it sweep on down. Again, almost like working a worm, just a tad faster. If we don't get a bite doing this, I'm just going to let the boat then kind of drift, maybe halfway down, make a couple casts, and then I'll get down on the very lower end, because if they're usually going to be on one end or the other. If they're really feeding heavy, that's when you'll catch them up on top of the hump. But that usually doesn't last very long. There he is. Good fish. I believe it's a good fish. Oh yeah. Come to daddy. Come on to daddy. Nice. Oh yeah. I've got a lot of favorite techniques for smallmouth fishing, and one of them is Carolina rigging. A couple reasons why I like Carolina rigging. One is you can cover a lot of territory. You can sit out deep, throw in shallow, work the lure all the way out, find out what depth the fish are holding in. You can work small baits right up to big baits. And one thing I really like to do with it is fish a big lizard. I'll use a Zoom 8-inch lizard, and it's one of my key techniques for getting a kicker fish. When I want that 3 or 4 pound smallmouth after I've got a limit, I'll go to this big lure. A lot of times I don't get as many bites on it, but when I do, he's almost always a good fish. And if you noticed here, I've got a lot of baits laid out. I've got the lizard, centipede, I got a big grub and a small grub, a tube, a Zoom fluke, and a crawfish looking bait. You know, that's my favorites, but there's a lot of other baits. In other words, what I'm telling you is that you can fish any kind of plastic bait you want to on a Carolina rig. But keeping it small most of the time for smallmouth. But again, if you want a big one, don't be scared to go out and throw that jumbo lizard. Now, when I rig Carolina rig or fish it, usually I'm using about 10-pound test line on smallmouth. I very seldom go over 10-pound tests unless they're real aggressive and biting. But 10-pound test will serve you really good. And I fish that on a 7-foot Bass Pro Extreme rod that I designed. It's a Woo Dave's Ledge Buster spinnerbait and Carolina rigging rod. You can be used for both techniques. It's a 7-foot, it's got a little bit of tip, plenty of backbone. About 10-pound strand line. And what I do here, I've got the Lindy rattling no snag weight on here. You just put it on your line going forward. You know, you want it to go through the water like that, like a little keel. Put a little bead on here. I've got a bead on here. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a Carolina keeper on, which is a neat little product that you can find in Bass Pro Shop. And all it is, it's just a rubber plastic or a plastic thing that has an insert in the middle. And if you put it in your pliers, just squeeze it down till it opens up. Run your line through it. Adjust it to where you want it. And let it go, and it locks down on your line. What I've got now is just that little deal right there. Again, your Lindy no snag weight. And I want to say something about this weight. I started fishing them about 3 months ago, and it was actually designed for smallmouth, I mean not smallmouth, but walleye fishing. The walleye fishermen on their trail, they use it to bounce baits along for walleyes. Well, somebody, you know, the word got out that it just never hung up. You can't hardly lose them. And so what happened, some of the bass fishermen found out about it, and we started using it, and man, it's just virtually impossible to hang up. And where it really shines is around rock. It's just something about the way it rides in the water. It bounces over things. You'll keep your bait in the water. You won't be sitting in the bottom of the boat retying. The bead just kind of helps, you know, gives a little clicking noise and everything. And the Carolina keeper is a neat deal. It locks on. You can adjust it for the length you want. On smallmouth fishing, I like to use a fairly long leader, about 4 foot. My next key is I'm going to use one of 2 hooks. It's going to be a Mustad ultra point hook here. This is a little 2/0. I'll use 1/0, even 1 a lot of times, but I never go over 2/0. You want a light wire hook that'll allow your bait to sink down slowly. I put it on with a Palomar knot, which simply double your line, go through the eye of the hook, tie 1 overhand knot, bring the hook back through that loop. Always wet a knot though before you pull it down. Cinch it up. Get you a pair of fingernail clippers and trim that line off. Don't bite it like I do. Dentist doesn't like for you to do that. Now again, you can put any array of these baits on there, but I'm gonna fish with this big lizard today because I want to try and catch a big fish. What I'll do when I'm rigging this lizard, I'll bring the point in about a 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch, roll it up over the knot, just like you're rigging a Texas rig worm. Then I bring the point of the hook, slide the lizard up, bring the point of the hook all the way through the lizard so it's sticking out. You can see where it hooks on my finger here. Next, I push it forward just a little bit and pop that point just under the skin. Now I've got me a weedless lizard, and when the fish bites down on it, that point will pop right out and you've got him. One other thing I like to do with all of these lures that you see here, with the exception of this one and this one, if you notice they've got chartreuse already built into them. The rest of these, I'm gonna dip a little bit of it chartreuse. Say for instance, even my watermelon seed lizard, I like to just put a little bit of a chartreuse tail on there. Sometimes I'll even dye these just a little legs chartreuse. But your little centipede, just put you a little bitty, just a little tad of chartreuse tail on there. That's all you need. But those fish, smallmouth love chartreuse. You know, it's kind of like me. I like a good ham, lettuce, tomato sandwich. Those smallmouth, they love chartreuse. What I'm doing here, I'm just kind of pulling this bait along the bottom, taking up my slack, letting it stop, pulling it 2 or 3 feet at a time, kind of fast, if you notice. but I'm keeping that bait dragging on the bottom. Let's say right now I hit something right there. Okay, I think that's where the fish should be. I'm gonna ease it up a little bit. Then I kind of hold my rod up a little more and I just jiggle it like this and shake it and barely move it, just an inch at a time. Just an inch at a time like that. Once I come by it, I think I was hung on a little piece of grass there. I come off of it, I go back to start moving it a little bit faster again. Just keeping in contact with the bottom. All of a sudden, let's say I hit a rock right there. Then again, I move it up just a little bit, slow down, start jiggling it, shaking it, letting it sit there. Work it real slow right through that strike zone area. There's a fish, he just pecked it. So I don't get in a hurry or anything. Just let him take it. Take all my slack up. He's pulling me up tight and hit him. Oh, that's a good fish too. Loosen the drag up a little bit on this one. He's coming up. Yeah, I think, no, he's going back down. God, he's strong. That sucker just don't want to give up. I'm gonna get him close to the boat. Look at the size of that fish. Great day. Don't get in a hurry. Come on. Whew. Come to daddy. Don't want to lose you. All right. There's your big lizard, and there's your big smallmouth. And that'd be a good kicker fish in a tournament about 3.5 pounds, 3 3/4 pounds. I'd take them all day long, go to the bank smiling. One thing about jig fishing you want to remember is if you're using a 1/4 ounce, which is a slow fall, you're not getting bit, move up to a 1/2 ounce, even a 3/4. Find out which way they want that bait falling. Do they want it falling fast or do they want it falling slow? If you're flipping over in the edge of the grass, you know you'll use a heavier jig to penetrate the cover, but most of the time I'm looking for holes out in the grass, and once I'm just fishing that one hole, and as soon as I don't get a bite, I reel it right back in, look for another hole, and just pitch it right over there. Basically for smallmouth, I'm looking for open holes, not throwing it in the thick grass. You know, you'll get one in the thick grass occasionally, get more largemouth that way. Most of the time when you're out in these holes fishing, again, you're opening water with a jig, smallmouth seem to hit it hard. You know, they'll wrap it pretty good. You don't have a lot of trouble as a rule, whereas if you're throwing a tube bait or something and they kind of come up and suck it in sometimes, you won't know the difference. But with the jig, they'll usually bop it pretty good. Most of the time you'll feel a hard thump and you just set the hook fast. But you know, if I feel anything, in other words, I'm working it down and I think it's in that open hole, if it comes up and hits grass, I'm gonna set the hook. You know, I'm not gonna take any chances. I don't wanna take any chances. But again, I'm trying to key right on the points of the grass, the little edges of the grass, and the holes over in the grass. We're right over a nice big rocky area now that's got a grass bed running down either side of it, and I can pitch to one side. And right now I would be pitching more to the right side because of the way the sun's shining. It gives them a little bit of a shady spot to be next to that grass. If it was early morning, I'd catch fish probably on both sides. But now I'm looking here, he's got him a little bit of shade right on the edge of the grass to back under there, and if any minnows or crawfish or anything come swimming along the edge of that grass, he can dart right out there and get him. If I cast over to this side though, it's pretty bright sun and he's probably going to be backed up in the grass. You go through an area you feel like should have smallmouth in it, and you go through there with a minnow type jig and you don't get a bite, come back with something like a green pumpkin or more of a crawfish looking type. But I know these fish have been feeding on minnows pretty good in this area. And this is a good way, most of the time with lure like this, you know, you're looking for that big kicker fish again. you're gonna catch bigger smallmouth. There's a beautiful place right there. There he is, right in that grass. Come out. Good fish, good fish. Good fish. Come to daddy. That's what it's all about. I had about 4 pounds of grass and 3 pounds of smallmouth. But that's the whole key to it, and that's where that jig will get you a good fish. Took a little while, but we got him. Another favorite lure of mine is a jigging spoon. This is a 3/4 ounce strata spoon from Bass Pro Shop. The Hopkins Shorty spoon's a real good one. There's a couple things that you need to do to them though. I like to put an O-ring up here in the front, they don't come with that, and attach a swivel to it. This gives the spoon a lot more action, a whole lot more action, and keeps from twisting your line. The other thing, most of these spoons are made for saltwater fishing, and they come with saltwater style hooks that are real heavy. I like to, I'll take that hook off and I'll put a triple grip mustad hook on. And it's a little lighter hook. If you hang up, you can usually straighten one of the hooks out and get your lure back. But I just put it on like so, take that hook off. I've got my swivel here. Now I'm going to show you one other neat trick that you can do with this spoon. I fish it like this a lot, but a lot of times when there's smallmouth around, what I'll do, I'll take a zoom tube, it's got a lot of chartreuse in it, and actually just kind of open it up and thread the bait down on it, and just work it over like that. Where I've got my swivel sticking out and my skirt's kind of covering the hook up. And I've got some chartreuse. If the fish bites it, it gives them something soft to hold on to. When I spray this with my Jack's juice, you know, it holds the flavor a whole lot better. And it's just a neat deal. It gives a little tail action to it. And I've caught a lot of fish like it. I've limited out quite a few times in tournaments in 5 or 6 minutes. Just stop on one drop or something, especially in a river. If you've got something that's got a lot of current, around bridge pilings, anywhere fish might school up, or if you find a deep rock pile in 20, 30 foot of water. This is a great technique. In a little cooler water, it usually works the best, but it's a good way to get a quick limit of fish, and it's a lot of fun fishing. You can catch all types of fish on this rig. All right, let me show you how to work this bait. Basically what I'm gonna do now, I've got it sprayed down with Jack's juice. I'm over top of my hump. I'm on the edge of a ledge or bridge pile and anything where fish are schooling up, a lot of bait fish. I'm gonna stay right on them, watching my depth finder, and just let my bait go right down to the bottom. That's one of the keys. Let's get it right to the bottom. Once you get it on the bottom like that, I just tighten up my line. And if you watch my rod tip, this is all I do. I just raise it up and let it flutter back slow. Raise it up slow, then let it fall back on a slack line every time. Don't jerk it like this. You go to jerking like that, what's going to happen if there's stripers in that lake or striped bass or hybrids or anything, they're going to grab it every time. You don't want to give him a bait that's real active. You want something that acts like it's almost dead. Just ease it up slowly. Something bumped it right there. Let it down to the bottom. Ease up slow, but when you let it drop, feel it down on the slack line. But let it fall naturally. Just ease it up. Not hard work at all. And just staying on top of your ledge. If your ledge, you know, falls off like this one does, ease out a little bit. Let a little bit of line out as you get deeper. Just make sure you're hitting bottom each time. Main thing, you want to watch that line because you know you brought it up 1.5 feet. It's got to go back down 1.5 feet. If it only goes down 6 inches, guess what? Something's got hold of it. In rivers and stuff, I like to stay usually on the back side of a hump where the water's washing over, and I think the fish are stacked up there, and you can just get on the back side of that island or something out in the river and just fish right on out, deeper and deeper. Let's keep letting the little line out, and you know, no problem. There he is. I don't waste any time with a nice smallmouth either. Get him right in the boat. Try to anyway. Good. Whew. Man, he nailed it. Oh, come to daddy. That's what I mean. He's still got a lot of fight left in him, but you can't mess around with them with a spoon. If you do, that heavy spoon, they'll come up. See how easy it fell out? If I'd have let that fish flop right there on the water, he's gone. So you got to get him in the boat in a hurry when you got him on a spoon. Just don't play with him. You got 17-pound line, and they'll come up and jump a lot of times right by the boat. Just swing them on over. But don't play with them. I see so many people trying to horse that fish and play them up on the surface, and they get off all the time. Thank you. We're going to let you go. There's a new technique out that's been started out in California. We're going to give them credit for another one, and that's called drop shotting. And it's something that's really been producing a lot of fish this year, especially in your Clearwater lakes and lakes that have got smallmouth bass in them. And I'm going to show you how to rig that. We're going to fish it a little bit, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. But it's a neat technique, and it's something that really aggravates the fish into hitting, especially if you're in a situation when fishing conditions are kind of tough. You can be fishing right around other boats and be catching fish, and they not be catching a fish. So I'm going to show you how to rig it. Pay close attention. What you do, you just come up the line, and you're going to use a small hook. This is a little bitty mustad hook. As you can see, it's a lot smaller than most hooks you would normally fish with. And I'll just come up the line, you know, a couple, 3 feet, give myself some extra line here, and tie a Palomar knot. Let's go through the eye of the hook. Simply tie your Palomar knot. Now, one of the keys I want to do is take this tag in line that I've got and run it through the top of the hook. In other words, I'm going to bring it from the top of the eye down. In other words, your hook sitting up like this, run your eye right back through the loop like that, or through the eye of the hook one time. It makes your hook sit up straight, like so. Then I'm going to come down the line here a certain distance, and we're going to put a little slip sinker on here, and don't ask me what you call it, but you can get it in Bass Pro. And the way this works, you just run the line right through this little wire deal. It's got a little hole in it. Just put your little tag in there and pull it up tight, and that holds your weight on. That's all it is. You don't even have to tie it. Now, if you hang up in the rocks or a fish hangs you up, that line will cut or pull through the weight, and you've still got your hook up here with your fish on it, or you saved your hook and your bait. Now what I'll do, I'll take a little finesse worm, like a Zoom 5-inch finesse worm. One of my favorites, again, is just an old centipede, and I just hook it right through here and just let it hang on there like so. Hook exposed, if you can fish it like that. If you're in an area where you got a Texas rig around cover or something, or a lot of grass, go ahead and just Texas rig it like you normally would. But what we've got now is, this is why it's called a drop shot rig. We've got a weight here on the bottom, we've got a worm here, and it's going to your rod. Well, once that bait gets on the bottom, you take your rod and start jiggling, and what is that worm doing? It's staying up there 2 or 3 feet off the bottom, just jiggling all around. What we're doing here, we're along a bluff wall. It drops right off into about 30 foot of water. I'm just kind of pitching this drop shot up on about a 20-foot ledge and just kind of jiggling it right down that little drop off there. You know, I just make my little underhand pitch cast right over there. Just let it go on down. Most of the time the smallmouth are going to be hanging right along a ledge or an edge like this, especially with a high bright sun. All you do once you get it to the bottom is just kind of wiggle that thing, do a lot of wiggling. You kind of leave it in one place. This is a real good bait too to put a rattler in. You know, put a glass rattle in your worm or whatever, because you're keeping that bait right there and you're jigging it a lot. And you're aggravating that fish, and that noise from that rattle will come in handy. I don't use rattles a lot, except for when I'm in grass fishing generally, but this is one time when a rattle would work good. I just didn't happen to have one in here today. So I'm just letting the wind blow me right down this drop off. But all you do here, you're not really trying to work this bait in real quick. You're just kind of jiggling it like that, shaking it, let it sit there, shake it, just take your rod tip. You know, that's why I like a medium action rod. This is an extreme rod from Bass Pro, and it's the, actually it's my tube rod that I designed for Bass Pro, and it's gonna be in the catalog this year. And it's basically for tube fishing, but it works great for this drop shot and tubes. Just a perfect rod for it. Medium action, gives you a good tip. That's what you want. You want that bait dancing a lot. You kind of just twitching along. Good fish. Feels like a good fish. Come on to daddy. This is a good fish right here. He just ain't gonna quit. And there he comes. Boom. I think I'll just swing him right on the end. He looked like he looked good. But there it is, the drop shot rig. Works again. Little zoom worm there. Not a monster bass, but a nice one. I'll take a limit of those any day, anywhere in the world. This is the technique that won the Bassmaster Classic. And I've gotten asked a lot about this, and I'm gonna show you exactly how I rigged it, exactly what I used and everything, and go over it with you. And then we're gonna do a lot of other things about tubes that I'm gonna talk about that work during the year and on different types of lakes and everything. And basically you want a good medium action rod, about 6 foot. It's like the extreme rod, the Woo Dave series that I designed with Bass Pro Shop. It's a medium action rod. It works a tube just wonderfully. It's got plenty of backbone, but a lot of tip. Allow you for a good hook set and light line. It allows you to play the fish. I use the extreme spinning reel. I'm spooling this with 6-pound test strand line, just regular old clear blue. I had 3 different size heads. I went from a 3/8 to a 1/4 to an 1/8. If the wind was slack, I used the 1/8 ounce as much as I could, because I always like to fish a tube most of the time falling slow, letting it fall slow and light a weight as I can. There's days when you need a fast fall that works good, but I'm trying to tell you things are going to work for you day in and day out. And I used that 1/8 ounce when the wind was down. As the wind got up a little bit, I went to a 1/4 ounce. And as the wind got to howling, I used a 3/8 ounce. I also had to change how I used them to the relation to the way the boat was positioned. If I was throwing straight into the wind, I had to use a heavier sinker or heavier lead head. If I was paralleling, I could go by, I even went to a 1/16 for a little while one day when the wind, we got a break in the wind for about 30 minutes. The majority of the damage was done on an 1/8 ounce head, probably 85% or 80% of the fish. But I got 2 or 3 of the real key kickers and everything on heavier heads. I was fishing a wall about 12 foot deep, and the bait had to sink right beside it. If I had a light head on there, what would happen is the wind would blow your line and pull the bait away from the wall, and it would sink. If you've seen my worm video at Bass Pro, you know when I'm fishing a plastic worm, I always want it to fall in the kitchen. That's why I use spinning tackle. Same thing that day with these tubes, or the 3 days of the Classic. That bait had to fall right down beside the wall. If it was 18, 24 inches off that wall, you would not get a bite. So Just use the head that'll get the bait to the place you're fishing. The way we're going to rig it, instead of sliding it all the way forward and putting your line tie here, back it up about 3/8 of an inch and pop your hole through right here. What this does, it gives you a little keel right here. And when that bait's falling, every time if I give it a little twitch, it'll shoot off to the side. If you have ever towed a boat before, if you hook to the bow of a boat and tow it along, it follows right behind you directly. But if you have to tie it to a cleat that's up on the bow of the boat, say 3 feet back, and you try and tow that same boat, that boat's going to dart off to the left, it's going to dart back to the right. Well, that's the same thing I want my tube to do, because it gives it a whole lot more action. It looks a lot more natural. Also, when it bounces on the bottom, that little rubber will just like kick it up like a little crawfish or something. The next key, I took chartreuse spigot. I've already told you I want chartreuse in every bait I'm fishing when I'm fishing for smallmouth. Some kind of chartreuse, a streak or something of chartreuse. But I just dipped the tail down in here, about a 1/2 inch. Got me a nice chartreuse tail on there. Then I sprayed it down good with Jack's juice. I know you've seen the Bassmaster show, but I'm a firm believer in scent. It's one thing I'll tell you about scent. I've been using it since day one, ever since I can remember. And I love Jack's juice because it comes in a spray can. It doesn't mess your carpet up and everything. And the scent stays on your bait a long time. So I'm going to show you a couple of casts with it gets it that I used in the Classic. Well, sometimes I'd make what I call a loop cast. It's just an underhand cast, but I'm gonna flip the bait way up in the air like that and let it fall. And what that does, that gives me a lot of slack, more slack line even, and it allows that bait to fall straight down when you're in the wind. If you try and make a straight cast, what happens when you make that cast, and I'll show you in the rod here, your bait's right here, but everything's tight. What does that do? That pulls that bait toward you. What is that bait doing? It's leaving the structure. You're not going to catch fish like that. You want that bait to fall down. So if you're in a windy condition or something, you want it to fall straight, sometimes you can make a high looping cast if you're going with the wind, and that'll get it to go down the edge of the grass, the edge of the wall, the bridge piling, or whatever you're fishing. Next cast, if you're fishing like where we were at the Classic, there was a wall there up about 6 or 8 feet in the air. Or let's say you've got a boat dock or something, you want to, it's what I call a skip cast. I just get out about 18 inches of line like this, and just like when I was a little kid skipping a rock across the water, that's what I want this bait to do. And I simply just get down low to the water like this. Did this a lot in the Classic to get down from where that wind was coming over that wall. And I'm gonna make a hard sidearm baseball swing, and I'm gonna skip this bait across the water, just like that. That way my line is real low to the water, and I don't have that wind resistance, and it'll sink down to the bottom. It's a nice fish here. He's gonna come into the top. Yes, sir. A little bit of salad and a little bit of fish. All right. Pretty, pretty. If you're fishing a topwater bait, say you're fishing a Zoom fluke and you're skipping it across the water and that smallmouth comes up and boils on it a couple times. What I'll do is reel in real quick, pick my tube rod up and shoot it right over there where he last boiled, and 8 out of 10 times I'll catch him. If I'm working a jerk bait back, you know, or a spinner bait, they like to follow them a lot of times. You'll see that big old fish coming behind it, but he won't bite it. Well, I want to pitch a tube over and catch him. Well, a lot of people know this, but what a lot of them don't understand is that these 3 heads come into play again. That little 1/16, 1/8 ounce head that's light, that makes this bait fall real slow. Good. That's what the smallmouth wants today. But he might not want that tomorrow. he might want that bait coming by him 90 miles an hour, so I'll put a 3/8 ounce head on too. And when I start out in the morning, you know, and the fish follows me up there, well, if I flip my light one over a couple times and he doesn't bite it, that's telling me maybe they want that fast fall. And I'll go to my heavier bait and pitch it, and a lot of times I'll catch them. The next day it might be the exact opposite. You know, no weather change, no nothing. But you can't just get stuck fishing one head in that tube. Get a lot of different size weights, a lot of different size, you know, go from a 1/16 all the way up to 3/8, even a 1/2 ounce sometimes, especially if you're going to be in a lot of wind. I don't think when you're up in 2 and 3 foot waves fishing, I'm pretty sure, you know, you can go heavy just about all the time and not have any problems. But if you get in real calm days, sometimes that doesn't work. You know, the tube is a big fish producing bait too, even though it's a little bait. That's another reason I like it. But I'm gonna tell you 3 ways or 3 conditions to fish this tube in. One is we're looking at structure. We've got our sunglasses on. We can see a big boulder over there. We can see a point of grass, a bridge piling. In other words, something that should be holding a smallmouth. And we're just gonna pitch it over to that structure and let it sink down. Once it gets to the bottom, we're only gonna move it about twice. If he doesn't bite it, we're gonna bring it back in. He probably wasn't there, he didn't want it. So when you're sight fishing, so to speak, structure and stuff you can see, you know, I just pitch it over, let it sink on a free line to the bottom, but only move it once or twice. The second method is you can cast it out and let it go to the bottom. And once it gets to the bottom, just let the wind drag you along. And this is a technique that a lot of the pros have caught on to in the last year or two. But you don't even hardly work the bait. You're letting the boat and just a rod tip dragging it and bouncing it on the bottom. That's where backing that head up in that tube a little bit makes a lot of difference, I think. Gives that tube that little action. But you don't hop it, you don't do nothing. Just maybe every once in a while you speed up just a little bit and let it back. But basically you just call dragging. That's all you're doing. You're just dragging along. Pretty lazy way to fish. Pretty boring when they're not biting. But most of the time they are biting once you find that depth range. The other way is I'll throw it out there and let it go to the bottom. And if they're not biting that dragging method for a little while, what I'll do, what I call popping or hopping, I'll just jerk it up like that. And that's bringing it up real quick. Sometimes the smallmouth can't stand that reaction. And then just letting it flutter back to the bottom on a slack line. Jerking it up like that. This works real good in the spring. Along about May, June, July. This is a good technique sometimes to try. If something's not working, jerk it up. Just let her fall back on a slack line once she hits the bottom. So that's about the major key ways to fish the tube. Come up here and let us see today. Oh man, what a smallie. What a smallie. That's the name of the game. Just a little belly lift, a lot of times that works. And that's what the tube is all about. Whoa! Don't go to the bottom. I better get you in the lip. Yeah, that's a beautiful smallmouth on the tube. I had 3 about like that in the Classic. That's what won it for me. That same rig I just told you about, fishing it the exact same way. So there you go, we're gonna turn him loose. Goodbye. Go back and grow up. When you want to fish the fluke in the spring, I find that slow retrieve works the best. So I stay with maybe a 2/0 or a 3/0, a lot lighter hook. What this does, it makes the bait fall slower and you can work it a lot slower. If I've got a big heavy hook in there and I throw it out and I want to work it slow, it's going to sink to the bottom. It's not going to work. So you got to use a light hook. But in the fall, I find that the fish want the fluke worked a whole lot faster, skipping right across the surface, really working it hard. So what I'll do then, I'll put a heavier hook in it. Sometimes I'll even add weight to it to make the bait a lot heavier so I can twitch it really quick and keep it up on the surface. If I try and do that with a light hook and worked it real fast, it would just scoot right across and I wouldn't have any action with it. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna rig it up the heavy way and show you how to fish it fast, because anybody, you know, when they're biting it slow, all you do is just throw it out and twitch it and let it sink a little bit and twitch it and let it sink a little bit. But I'm gonna rig it up for the heavy way. So I'm gonna put the big heavy hook in here. Again, this is a lot of hardware, but you're moving that bait so fast he doesn't have time to look at it. And don't think that he can't catch up with it. Just slide this up into the belly, turn it around, bring it up, and it got a little place here to hide most of your hook. But I like to bring the point through. I'm usually throwing it over grass and working it up on the top, so it doesn't make any difference if the point is out. But as you can see here, it kind of goes back in. I might even also take this lead nail, or I've just cut the end off of a nail, and slide it up in the head right here to even give it more weight. Just like this. Bury it on now. I've got a pretty heavy little bait there, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna drop it right here in the water and let you look at it real quick and watch what it does. See how it looks like a live minnow skipping along? And I can pull it really hard and fast like that. That's because I've got that heavy hook and that weight in there. Now, if I wanted to work it real slow, see, if I was trying to work it slow with a heavy hook, it would just go on to the bottom. That's when I'd have to put the light hook in there. But what we're doing here, I've got that heavy weight, I've got that heavy hook in here. I've already dyed that tail with a spigot. I've sprayed it good with Jack's juice. And I'm gonna make just a couple casts out over top of this grass. I don't know if I'll get any bites right now, but I just want to show you this technique anyway. Just sail it on out there and use that rod tip, working it really fast right up on the surface. Just keep jerking it and twitching it. Once in a while you can just kill it. Then go right back to jerking it again. But when the fish are real aggressive, and this is a real good fall technique. It's a lot better in the fall than it is in the spring. But, or if a fish are schooled, you see them busting on top. You know, you can keep it right up on the surface and that thing's darting and doing everything, but you need that heavy hook and you need that weight in there to make that bait work properly. So just remember, when you need to work the bait fast, use a big hook. If you want to work a medium speed, go down to a 4, 3/0. If you want to work it real slow, go to a 2/0, even a 1/0. Here's another neat lure that I like to use. It's made by Possum Lure Company. It's a little rubber-bodied lure that looks like a little sunfish or a brim. And it's a real neat lure. It runs about, you can run it, the faster you run it, the shallower it runs. If you slow it down, it'll go on down deep. And I love to run this bait over top of grass. But one of the tricks to fishing this bait is, you notice I don't have any chartreuse on this one. So what I'll do, again, I'll go back to my dip and die and just put me a little chartreuse on there. One thing about it, you can work this thing fast, you can work it slow. Just find out what the smallmouth want. Let them tell you if they want the bait work slow or do they want it fast. You really don't have to put a lot of action to it because it's got a lot of built-in action, but every once in a while you can give it a little twitch or something, just like anything else you're working. A lot of times when I'm fishing these tight, fast-moving baits and skipping along over this grass, I'll start out in about 10 foot, 12 foot of water and just work right straight to the shoreline, all the way till it gets 2 foot deep. Then I might go down the bank a little bit and kind of angle back out and again go back out in 10, 12, 14 foot and just sweeping back and forth over these flats and bays and stuff till again you find the fish. What depth are they in, what retrieve do they want, and then just stay with it. There he is. Good little fish too. He eat that possum lure up. Oh, come out of that grass. There you go. Man, I can't believe how strong these things are. These things are just don't never quit. Don't never quit. Go on, Big Daddy. Come here, let's see what we got. Look at that. Whew. Name of the game. Possum lure, smallmouth bass. The grass about 10 foot deep. Grass growing up about 10 foot and 12 foot of water. I just burned that thing right across there and he come out there and nailed it. Pretty fish, pretty fish. Pretty fish. Gone. Another one of the key techniques for catching smallmouth is a jerk bait, a hard jerk bait. We talked about the fluke earlier. That's what we call a soft jerk bait. But there's a lot of different companies that make a lot of different jerk baits, but I've laid out some of my favorite ones right here. Pointer 100, that's a real good one. The XPS series by Bass Pro Shop. But this is probably one of the most popular colors. It's called the clown. You got red, yellow, and white in it, and it's got a little hologram finish on the side of it. It's just a dynamite bait. Got it equipped with musthead ultra-point hooks, and we're gonna give it a try. But this fishing a jerk bait is dynamite in grass, in over rock, but especially grass. Fishing grass edges or where you got grass under the water, it seems to just work. I don't know, smallmouth can't stand it sometimes. I've caught some really big catches on jerk baits, and even out as deep as 18, 20, 22 foot of water, those smallmouth will come up out of nowhere and get them. So don't be scared. Don't just throw it up around shallow grass and stuff like that. When you're in a lake with smallmouth, fish it out in 20 foot of water. Don't worry about it, over top of a hump or anything. Those smallmouth will come a long ways to get a bait when they see it working. And that clown color is probably the #1 color for smallmouth. You know, we're talking smallmouth fishing, and next I would use something with maybe some orange belly to it, something that's got an orange belly. Sometimes I'll take my clown bait and actually take a spike at marker and put me in an orange belly, just a little orange strip down the belly of the bait right here. But we're not going to do that today. We're going to fish it like this. I do that again more in the fall also. I'll put that orange on there in the fall. But that clown is a good all-around color, and if you can only buy one lure, just go to Bass Pro Shop and get the XPS series jerk bait and get the clown color, and you'll be in pretty good shape most anywhere you go. So there's days they want black and silver, and days they want gold, and gold's probably your second #1 color next to clown. I like to fish it on about 10-pound test line. I don't like to go real heavy line. It just tends to work a lot better on light line. I'll fish it on a spinning rod or a bait caster, something that's got a lot of tip to it. It'll keep that bait wiggling and give it that action. The main thing here is, again, don't work that bait with your reel. In other words, don't reel it in like that. Do everything with your wrist and your rod tip when you throw it out. The only thing you use the reel for is if you get some slack line right here, you take that slack line up with a reel. You do not fish the bait with a reel. It's all done with a rod tip and your wrist. The only reason you even put a reel on the rod is because you got to take the slack line in when it gets slack. Another big problem I see a lot of people making, they're trying to reel that bait instead of work it. But just use that rod tip. You can work it sometimes in the fall especially. They want it worked really hard and fast like that. I mean, just go right on down the bank, get on the edge of that grass line and work that thing hard. But just get in a rhythm with that thing, like a 1, 2, 3. Just constantly change it, making that bait do something erratic. Smallmouth love it. Good fish. There you go, there you go, there you go. And that's what happens in this grass. That's why you lose a lot of these darn things. You get that big glob of grass on there like that. You think the fish is 3 times as big as it is. That's still a right nice little fish there. I'll take him all day. Come here. Come here. Now how do we reach in there? Whoa. Come here, Big Daddy. You don't want to give up now. You don't have that grass pulling. I think I'm going to try and belly lip him. Ooh. We've covered a lot of things on this tape. I want to talk about the spinnerbait just a little bit. You know, a half-ounce spinnerbait, and this is a edge buster. It's made by Strike Zone Lures. You notice this one's got gold blades. But one thing about smallmouth fishing, sometimes you might want one that's got chartreuse blades, a chartreuse blade, a white blade, nickel blade. You know, you got to change things around a little bit to find out what they're biting on. This one kind of imitates, to me, a crawfish maybe, I don't know, but it's got that good chartreuse color to it that smallmouth love. That's one thing. Any spinnerbait I'm fishing for smallmouth, it's going to have something chartreuse on it, just like every other lure I've talked about today. And basically what I do for smallmouth is just two basic retrieves. Either wind it hard as you can possibly wind it across the surface, or running it down 2 or 3 feet when you're around grass. You know, I'm talking about fishing around grass, and that's what we're around right now. And just remember that you can't wind it fast enough. I don't care how fast you wind it, a smallmouth can still catch it, and there's days they want it like that. And sometimes they want it like that in the morning and the evening, they want it slowed down. We're just gonna try and buzz it. I like to put the trolling motor on and kind of keep it moving and go along until I hit a fish or two. Another thing, this is a deal, you always want to be watching that spinnerbait coming through the water and looking about 2 or 3 feet behind it, because a lot of times you get those trailers we were talking about earlier today, and that's when you flip your tube over there and catch him. So always be looking, have a good pair of sunglasses. You notice I'm wearing the Finest. You can also get these at Bass Pro Shop. But I'm just bringing that spinnerbait fast as I can. And if I do this for an hour or two and don't get a bite, I'm gonna quit, because I can't stand it all day. If they're biting it, it doesn't seem like you're fishing it real fast. But if they're not biting it, after a while you're gonna get tired. But again, 15, 20 minutes, you hadn't had a bite, throw it out there, slow roll it a little bit. Just let it get on down maybe 2 feet or 3 feet, tick along right along the edge of the top of the grass. Because sometimes, they'll come up and get it working slow like that, and other times they want it worked real fast. But one thing when I'm fishing for smallmouth and I'm throwing spinnerbaits, I want to have my reel in gear right before that bait hits the water, because probably 80% of the time that smallmouth will grab that bait. As soon as it hits the water, if you're not ready, you'll miss him every time. So what I do is the bait starts falling in the air, I just throw it in gear, and I'm turning it as soon as it hits the water. Just like that. Good fish too. He's coming up, he's coming up. Good golly dang. There he comes, there he comes. Yes, sir. That's made for a nice day. Edge buster spinnerbait, gold blades, over top of the grass, burning it. This is probably one of the biggest ones we've got today. Fish will go 4 pounds. A limit like that'll win just about every tournament you're ever in. That's a beautiful fish. Look at the markings, just beautiful. So proud to be acquainted with you, big boy. I hope during this tape that I've told you something on here that'll help you. If I haven't, you probably know it all. And there's probably some things you know that I don't know. Write me a letter and tell me. I'll be glad to listen to it. I've tried to cover basically everything. I know there's a lot of things we didn't get into, crankbaits and stuff like that. We just didn't have time. It's hard to do everything, but you're getting way more than your money's worth, I believe, with this tape. It's a lot longer than most normal tapes, and I'm just proud that I could share this knowledge with you. I've been fishing, I'm 54 years old, and I've been on the tournament circuit a long time, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna be just right honest and point blank and tell you right to your face. If I was 30 years old and knew all this, I wouldn't be putting it on a tape right now to tell you. But I hope you'll take this information and go out and have many enjoyable years of fishing. Take a kid with you when you go and let him learn to enjoy it too. God bless you, and we hope to see you on the next tape.